There's a quiet reason why some people seem to rise even when everything around them feels unstable. A reason that isn't just hard work and isn't just intelligence. It's deeper than that. Invisible, ancient and strangely consistent. A code. A mental and spiritual pattern that has traveled through centuries, hidden in plain sight. Napoleon Hill spent more than 20 years studying the most powerful and wealthy men of his era. Industrialists, bankers, leaders who built empires from nothing. And the further he went, the more unsettling his conclusion became. Every one of them, without exception, operated from a mindset that was deeply spiritual, even when they never used religious language. They believed before they saw, they visualized, they declared, and most of all, they fed their minds with words that shaped their destiny. What most people don't know, and what almost no one says out loud, is that Hill understood sacred texts not as blind religion, but as tools for subconscious programming. He believed that certain words, repeated with emotion, faith, and consistency, could reorganize the human mind from the inside out. And that's exactly where the Psalms come in. The Psalms aren't just prayers, they're mental archetypes, sound patterns that, when internalized, align human thinking with universal principles: provision, protection, expansion, inner authority. Maybe you've read Psalm 23 countless times. Maybe Psalm 91 was spoken in moments of fear. But no one taught you how to activate these words as prosperity codes. Hill taught that every form of wealth begins as a mental state. And if that's true, and it is, then the Psalms are ancient shortcuts for installing that state. It's no accident that kings, strategists, and spiritual leaders return to them again and again. It's no accident that certain people prosper without fully understanding how. They keep repeating the right codes, with the right posture, in the right emotional state. And that is exactly what you're about to learn. Today you'll discover why 7 specific Psalms, 23, 1, 27, 37, 91, 112, and 128, form a powerful sequence for reprogramming your mind for wealth, stability, and continuous abundance. Not as superstition, not as empty mysticism, but as spiritual mental science, the same kind of inner law Hill studied, lived, and taught. If you feel like this message found you at the right time, it wasn't random. Something in you already knows there's more. That prosperity isn't privilege, it's alignment. Take a breath. Quiet your mind for a moment, because from here on, you won't just hear Psalms, you'll activate them. If this already touched something in you, comment, "I recognize this truth." There's a question that has to be asked with brutal honesty. If the Psalms are so powerful, why do so many people read them and still stay trapped in scarcity? Napoleon Hill taught that it isn't information that transforms a life. It's the mental state in which that information is absorbed. And here's what almost nobody realizes. Most people read the Psalms while they're vibrating in fear, lack, or desperation, and that quietly neutralizes the power of the words. Your subconscious doesn't respond to language by itself. It responds to the dominant emotion behind the language. So when someone reads a psalm about protection, while they're internally shaking with insecurity, what gets programmed isn't faith, it's survival. When someone recites a psalm about provision, while they secretly feel guilty for desiring wealth, the subconscious records conflict, not abundance. Hill was clear. When negative emotion is mixed with positive affirmation, the result cancels out. It's like pressing the gas while the brake is still locked. There's another mistake that keeps the door closed, treating the Psalms like pleading instead of declaring. Listen carefully to how many Psalms are written. They don't beg. They establish identity. They decree reality. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." That isn't a request. It's a claimed state. But a mind trained in scarcity reads those words as distant, almost impossible, like they belong to someone else. And Hill warned about this exact pattern. Whatever the mind cannot accept as possible, it will never allow you to reach. The spiritual diagnosis is simple, but it's deep. People want prosperity, but they still think like survivors. They want abundance, but they feel small. They want wealth, but they carry beliefs of unworthiness. And the subconscious, faithful and obedient, simply executes the identity it has been given. The Psalms function like access codes, But codes only work when entered with the correct consciousness. Otherwise, the door stays shut and the person blames the words, when the real issue is the internal state. And then there's mechanical repetition. Hill taught that repetition without emotion becomes empty habit. Reading a psalm like a routine religious task doesn't imprint the mind. The subconscious needs presence, intention, feeling, because feeling is the ink that writes on the inner world. That's why some people say, "I pray, but nothing changes." And the truth is harsh yet freeing. Things do change, but only up to the limit of your current identity. Prosperity doesn't enter a mind that still sees itself as small. If this is starting to click, it means something is opening in you, an alignment between faith and mind that most people never develop. And before we go deeper, do this one thing now. Subscribe and follow Wealth Rewired, because this series is going to rebuild the way you think, speak, and move through money from the inside out. Now comment, "I feel this truth." Now we reach the breaking point, the moment where everything changes, not outside of you, but within you. Napoleon Hill called this the decisive shift in mental state, when the mind stops merely wanting and starts assuming. Here's the metaphysical reversal almost nobody understands. The Psalms don't function as requests to heaven. They function as internal commands to the subconscious. Hill taught that the subconscious accepts whatever is repeated with emotion, faith, and expectation. It doesn't argue, it doesn't analyze, it executes. And when you grasp that, you realize the Psalms were written in the exact language your deeper mind obeys. Each psalm carries an identity embedded inside it. When you read it correctly, you're not just talking about God, you're defining who you are in the world. Look at Psalm 1. It describes the person who prospers in everything they do, not because they hustle harder, but because they think differently, choose differently, position themselves differently. That is wealth mindset in its purest form. Psalm 23 doesn't speak about money directly, but it installs something even more powerful, certainty of continuous provision. Hill emphasized that when the fear of lack dissolves, creativity awakens. A mind that doesn't fear becomes bold, magnetic, resourceful. Psalm 27 activates courage and inner authority. Psalm 37 dissolves anxiety about the future. Psalm 91 creates a felt sense of safety and stability. Psalm 112 programs honor, strength, and legacy. Psalm 128 anchors prosperity with peace at home and continuity. Do you see the pattern? Each psalm removes a specific inner blockage that prevents wealth from forming. Hill said poverty begins as an emotional state: fear, doubt, hurry, comparison, guilt. And the psalms strike those exact points, reorganizing your inner world before any outer result can appear. Here is the secret that turns words into power. When you read a psalm as if it is already true about you, your subconscious begins to act to prove it true, not mysticism, spiritual psychology applied. For Hill, faith wasn't blind belief. Faith was emotional conviction repeated until it became a mental reality. And the Psalms were designed to generate that kind of conviction, strong enough to reshape your decisions, your perception, and eventually your outcomes. So right here, something must be decided inside you. You will no longer read these texts like someone waiting. You will read them like someone who has already entered the frequency, because prosperity doesn't respond to weak requests. It responds to assumed states. And if this shift is happening in you right now, confirm it consciously. Comment: I'm starting to understand. Now you're entering territory most people never reach: conscious practice. Napoleon Hill taught that knowledge only becomes power when it's converted into a ritualized habit. Without ritual, the mind doesn't obey. Without consistency, the subconscious doesn't accept. What you're about to learn is not a normal prayer. It's a mental, spiritual reprogramming ritual built to align emotion, words, and identity. First, understand the core principle. The subconscious is most impressionable right after you wake up and right before you fall asleep. These are the moments when the critical mind is weaker. Hill described them as gateways for mental imprinting. This is where new identity slips past old resistance. Step 1. Prepare the state. Before any psalm, sit in silence for 2 minutes. No asking, no begging. Just slow down. Prosperity does not enter a rushed mind. Breathe deep, slowly, and say internally, I place myself in a state of receiving. Let that sentence settle, not as hope, as posture. Step 2. Active reading. Read each psalm quietly, out loud or mentally, but with a slower rhythm than you normally would. After each verse, pause for a few seconds. Let the meaning land as if it is already unfolding in your life. Don't read it to God. Read it into your subconscious. Daily sequence, Psalm 23. Installs provision and trust. Psalm 1 aligns choices with sustainable prosperity. Psalm 27 strengthens courage and inner authority. Psalm 37 dissolves financial anxiety. Psalm 91 creates safety and emotional stability. Psalm 112 anchors honor, wealth, and legacy. Psalm 128 seals prosperity with peace and continuity. This is not random. It's surgical. Each psalm targets a different inner barrier, so wealth doesn't have to fight its way into your life. It simply flows through an aligned identity. Step 3. Final declaration. After the 7 psalms, speak one closing decree, not as a request, but as a decision. I now assume the identity of someone guided, protected, and prosperous. I lack nothing. Everything cooperates. My mind accepts this as truth. Hill taught that the mind needs a clear final statement to close the cycle of suggestion. This is you sealing the imprint. Duration. 10 to 15 minutes a day. No negotiation with consistency. No skipping days. The mind respects firmness. The 21-day cycle Hill taught that mental habits consolidate through repeated cycles. For 21 days, don't obsess over external results. Observe internal shifts, because when the inside changes, the outside follows. This ritual is not to beg for wealth. It is to become the kind of person who attracts it. If this awakened something in you, don't keep it silent. Name it. Comment, I align with this energy. When the mind begins to accept a new identity, something quiet happens. The outside world starts responding. Napoleon Hill called this organized attraction, not as mysticism, but as the natural consequence of a mind saturated with purpose. Here's the key of this next expansion. The Psalms don't just reorganize your inner world, they activate invisible fields of opportunity. When Psalm 23 dissolves the fear of lack, your mind stops operating in defense mode. And a mind that isn't afraid becomes creative. It takes healthier risks. It sees solutions. Hill taught that fear closes intelligence, while faith expands it. When Psalm 1 speaks of the person who prospers in everything they do, it installs coherence, alignment between thought and action. You start choosing better without forcing it, and better choices create better results, not because of luck, but because of inner order. Psalm 27 awakens authority, and people with inner authority are perceived as trustworthy. Trust attracts business, partnerships, recognition. Hill observed that the wealthy think with firmness before visible results exist. They don't wait for evidence to become stable. They become stable, and then evidence follows. Psalm 37 dissolves the anxiety of when. And here's a deep secret. Anxiety repels prosperity. A rushed mind broadcasts scarcity. A calm mind broadcasts abundance. Psalm 91 creates emotional safety. When you feel protected, your nervous system relaxes, and a regulated nervous system makes smarter decisions. Prosperity is not only spiritual, it's biological. When your system is at peace, you stop self-sabotaging. You stop making fear-based financial moves. You think long-term. Psalm 112 anchors honor and stability. It rewires deservingness. Many people don't prosper because deep down, they don't feel worthy. Hill taught that the mind rejects anything that conflicts with self-image. So if your inner image is, I'm not meant to have more, you'll unconsciously repel opportunities that would force you to rise. And Psalm 128 closes the cycle. Prosperity with peace. Because wealth without peace becomes punishment, and the subconscious knows that. It will protect you from what it believes will harm you. Even if that harm is success you don't feel ready to hold. So the more you repeat this sequence, the less you force outcomes. You become compatible with them, and what is compatible naturally approaches. This is when subtle signs start appearing: ideas, invitations, intuition, coincidences. Hill said it isn't coincidence, it's an aligned mind noticing opportunities that were always there, but invisible to a survival identity. So don't obsess over the how, don't micromanage the timeline, control the state. Because when you sustain the state, the path reveals itself. If you feel something expanding in you right now, like your inner world is getting wider, confirm it with presence. Comment, "I feel this expansion." There comes a moment when the practice stops being something you do and becomes something you are. Napoleon Hill taught that real wealth doesn't respond to occasional desire. It responds to a consolidated identity. You don't attract prosperity because you want it. You attract prosperity because you operate from it. And here is the truth that changes everything. Your subconscious only accepts what is consistent with your self-image. If, deep down, you still see yourself as someone who struggles to survive, any progress will feel unstable. You'll climb and then sabotage, you'll receive and then rush to lose it. But when the mind assumes the identity of someone guided, protected, and prosperous, it begins to reject small choices automatically. It becomes allergic to self-betrayal. This is what the Psalms do when practiced correctly. They rewrite the internal narrative. Psalm 23 doesn't just speak of provision, it creates posture. Psalm 1 doesn't just speak of prospering, it creates standards. Psalm 112 doesn't just speak of wealth, it creates dignity. And dignity is one of the pillars of lasting prosperity. Hill observed that prosperous people don't feel guilty for expanding. They don't apologize for wanting more. They understand that growth is a natural result of aligned thought, emotion, and action. Scarcity thinking makes desire feel dangerous. Abundance thinking makes desire feel like direction. And at this stage, something shifts quietly. You start acting differently without conscious effort. You manage your time better. You protect your energy more fiercely. You become selective about who you're around, what you consume, what you tolerate. Not because you think you're better than anyone, but because your identity is no longer negotiable. Hill called this autosuggestion transformed into character. When the mind accepts a new pattern, behavior follows, and when behavior changes, destiny changes. This is also the stage where people around you start noticing. They'll say you changed, that you're calmer, more focused, less available for chaos. And they're right, because you're no longer reacting from scarcity. You're responding from inner abundance. You stop chasing proof. You stop needing permission. You stop living like you're one mistake away from collapse. You become steady. And steady people build wealth. So if you're feeling that consolidation happening, like you're becoming someone you don't have to force, name it. Don't let it stay invisible. Comment, "I recognize who I'm becoming." This is where the final alignment happens and where many people fail, because they believe, in a subtle but damaging way, that spirituality and wealth are enemies. Napoleon Hill was one of the few who had the courage to claim the opposite. Material prosperity is often the natural result of a spiritually aligned mind. When faith and mindset are in conflict, guilt is born. When faith and mindset are aligned, flow is born. The Psalms were not written to pull a person away from the physical world, but to bring order to it. They don't glorify scarcity. They glorify provision, stability, righteous harvest, and inner authority. Scripture doesn't condemn abundance. It warns against disorder. The issue was never having more. The issue is being ruled by what you have, instead of ruling it with wisdom. Hill understood this when he noticed something consistent among the wealthy individuals he studied. They had inner peace while expanding outward. They weren't split. They didn't live with constant inner debate. Is it okay for me to grow? They moved with quiet conviction. And that quiet conviction is what the Psalms restore. When you integrate the Psalms into a wealth mindset, something powerful happens. You stop dividing your life into spiritual and financial. Everything becomes an expression of the same principle, alignment. You work with clearer intention. You earn without guilt. You grow without fear of losing yourself. Psalm 128 reveals this integrated prosperity. blessing in your work, peace in your home, continuity into the future. Not isolated wealth, integrated wealth. Because the subconscious doesn't just want success, it wants safety. It wants stability. It wants peace. And if deep down you believe that prosperity will destroy your peace, your mind will resist it. It will keep you under your own potential to protect you. Hill used to say true success is the kind that doesn't charge your soul as the price, and the Psalms act like anchors, keeping you centered while you expand. This is the moment you understand something essential. God does not need to be convinced to bless you. Your mind needs to stop resisting what it was created to hold. Prosperity isn't something that arrives from the outside. It flows through a person who is aligned. So if this integration is landing in you, if you feel the inner war dissolving, don't just agree silently, declare it. Comment, I align with this truth. Now you've reached the point where there is no return. Not because the world suddenly changed, but because something inside you did. Napoleon Hill taught that when the mind crosses a certain threshold of conviction, it doesn't go back to the old pattern. Something seals. Something becomes final. The Psalms you moved through were not merely read, they were installed. A new inner foundation now exists in you, quiet but unshakable. A mind that no longer begs, no longer rushes, no longer lives divided between faith and reality. You understand, and that understanding changes everything. Prosperity is not a future event. It is an assumed condition. Psalm 23 is no longer a distant promise. It is posture. I shall not want becomes a state. Psalm 1 is no longer a beautiful idea. It becomes criteria. You prosper because you think, choose, and act differently. Psalm 27 becomes silent authority. Psalm 37 dissolves the pressure of time. Psalm 91 dissolves fear. Psalm 112 dissolves the guilt of growing. And Psalm 128 seals it all with peace, continuity, and honor. Hill taught that when faith becomes a mental habit, destiny obeys. And now you know what that means. So from this point forward, don't force results. Sustain the state, continue the ritual, protect your mind, honor the new identity. Because life doesn't respond to those who only ask, it responds to those who assume. And before we close, speak this decree with presence, not mechanically, not as a performance. Feel each line as a truth already established. Final decree. My mind is aligned with provision. My awareness accepts abundance as natural. I walk guided, protected, and prosperous. What I think organizes. What I do multiplies. What I touch grows. My mind is being renewed, and my miracle has already begun. Take a deep breath. If you made it to the end, it wasn't curiosity. It was resonance. Something in you recognized the path. Now seal the commitment. Like this video, subscribe to Wealth Rewired, and turn on the notifications. Because what you just started, we're going to deepen. And in the comments, write, my mind is renewed. That is your seal. That is your beginning. See you in the next one.